I learned the hard way that a woman named Patricia can weaponize a snow emergency faster than a blizzard can bury a driveway. My name is Warren Fischer, and I have been running Fischer Snow Removal in Burlington, Vermont, for the past 15 years. What started as a side hustle with a beat-up pickup and a second-hand plow turned into a legitimate business with 3 trucks, 2 employees, and contracts with half the neighborhoods in the greater Burlington area. I knew every street, every tight corner, every mailbox that jutted out just a little too far. Winter was my season, and I was damn good at what I did. The Maple Ridge Homeowners Association hired me 4 years ago. It was a sprawling development of about 200 homes, all built in that cookie-cutter suburban style that screamed upper-middle-class comfort. Wide streets, 2-car garages, the occasional decorative lamppost. The contract was straightforward. When snow accumulated past 2 inches, I would plow all the streets and cul-de-sacs, making sure residents could get in and out safely. The HOA paid me a flat seasonal rate, and everyone was happy. Or at least, everyone was happy until Patricia Hendricks became the HOA president 18 months ago. Patricia was 53 years old with that particular haircut that seemed to be standard issue for women who enjoyed complaining to managers. You know the one. Blonde highlights that looked a little too brassy, cut short in the back and longer in the front. She wore velour tracksuits in jewel tones and carried a designer handbag that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her husband, Gerald, was some kind of finance guy who traveled constantly, leaving Patricia with too much time and too much authority. The problem started small. She began showing up during my plowing jobs, flagging me down to point out spots I allegedly missed. Never mind that I had just plowed those spots 10 minutes ago and fresh snow was still falling. She would stand there in her puffy coat with her arms crossed, watching me like a prison warden. Then came the emails. Long, detailed emails about proper snow removal technique, with links to articles she had found online. She CC'd the entire HOA board on every single one. I tried to be professional. I replied politely, explained my methods, assured her that I had been doing this for 15 years and knew what I was doing. That only seemed to encourage her. She started taking photos with her phone, zooming in on tire tracks or slight ridges in the snow, as if she were documenting evidence for a court case. The real trouble began on a Tuesday morning in mid-January. The weather forecast had been screaming about the incoming nor'easter for 3 days. Everyone in Vermont knew this was going to be a big one. 8 to 14 inches predicted, with wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour. I had already called my 2 employees, Marcus and Tony, and we had the trucks prepped and ready to roll by 3 in the morning. The snow started falling around 4. Heavy, wet flakes that accumulated fast. By 6, we were already out on our routes. I took Maple Ridge myself because it was the biggest contract and the most complicated layout. The development was built on rolling hills, with streets that curved and looped back on themselves. You had to plow it in a specific order to avoid getting trapped or leaving some poor resident blocked in. I started at the main entrance and worked my way through the primary roads, my plow scraping against asphalt with that familiar grinding sound. The headlights cut through the swirling snow, illuminating a world that was rapidly turning white. I had my route memorized, muscle memory guiding me through the turns. Oakwood Drive, then Birch Lane, then the loop around Cedar Court. The snow was coming down so hard I had to keep my wipers on full blast just to see. I was about halfway through when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Patricia. Of course it was Patricia. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but that would only generate another 5 emails about my failure to respond promptly. I hit the answer button on my truck's Bluetooth. Warren speaking. Warren, this is Patricia Hendricks. Her voice was sharp and clipped. I need you to stop what you are doing immediately. I felt my jaw tighten. Patricia, I am in the middle of plowing. There are 8 inches on the ground already and more coming. I need to keep the streets clear. I am aware of the weather, Warren. However, you are not following proper protocol. According to the HOA bylaws, Section 12, subsection 4, all snow removal operations must be approved in advance by the board president. I did not approve you to start plowing at this hour. I actually laughed. I could not help it. Patricia, my contract says I plow when accumulation reaches 2 inches. We are way past that. I am doing my job. Your contract is subordinate to HOA bylaws. I am instructing you to cease operations until we can have an emergency board meeting to discuss proper procedure. The snow was piling up on my windshield between wiper passes. Somewhere behind me, a car was trying to navigate the unplowed section I had not reached yet, its tires spinning. You want me to stop plowing during a blizzard so you can have a meeting. Do you hear yourself? I hear myself perfectly well. What I hear from you is insubordination and disrespect for the authority of this board. If you continue without proper authorization, I will have no choice but to terminate your contract. My hands gripped the steering wheel. I had dealt with difficult clients before, but this was insane. Patricia, people need to get to work. Emergency vehicles need access. I am not stopping. Then you leave me no choice. The line went dead. I sat there for a moment, snow swirling in my headlights, trying to process what had just happened. Then I shook my head and kept plowing. She was bluffing. She had to be bluffing. No one was crazy enough to fire a snow removal company in the middle of a nor'easter. I finished Cedar Court and was heading toward Maple Way when I saw it. Patricia's white Cadillac SUV parked sideways across the street, completely blocking the path forward. She was standing next to it, arms crossed, that grim expression of satisfaction on her face that I had come to know so well. I stopped the truck and rolled down my window. The cold air hit me immediately, along with a face full of snow. Patricia, what the hell are you doing? Move your car. No, Warren, you were given a direct order to stop and you refused. This is private property managed by the HOA, and I have the authority to deny you access. You are blocking a public street during a snow emergency. This is insane. This is not a public street. This is a private road maintained by the Homeowners Association. And as president, I am well within my rights to control who has access. Now, I suggest you turn your truck around and leave, or I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing. I stared at her. Snow was accumulating on her coat, on her hair, on the hood of her Cadillac. Behind her, I could see the unplowed streets stretching deeper into the development. At least 60 homes back there, all blocked in because of one woman's power trip. There are people who need to get out, Patricia. Medical emergencies, jobs, schools. Then they will understand the importance of following proper procedures. When they complain, I will make sure they know this disruption is your fault for refusing to comply with HOA regulations. She pulled out her phone. Now, are you leaving, or am I calling the police? Every fiber of my being wanted to argue, to push forward, to move her car myself if I had to. But I also knew that if she called the cops and made some story up about me threatening her or trespassing, I could lose more than just this contract. I could lose my business license, my insurance, everything I had built. Fine, I said. The word tasted like acid. You want to play it this way? Fine. I put the truck in reverse and carefully backed out the way I had come. Patricia watched me go with that smug little smile, like she had just won the Super Bowl. I drove back to the entrance of Maple Ridge, my blood boiling, and parked on the public road just outside the development. Then I called my lawyer. Brian Westwood had handled my business contracts since the beginning. He was a good guy, mid-40s, with a practical approach to legal problems. He answered on the third ring, sounding groggy. "Warren, it is 6:30 in the morning. I know, and I am sorry, but I have a situation." I explained everything, from Patricia's call to her blocking the street to her threat to call the police. I heard rustling on the other end, like he was sitting up in bed. "Okay, first things first. The roads in that development, are they actually private or public?" "I always thought they were public. I mean, there are street signs and everything." "That does not matter. Lots of HOA developments have private roads. Let me look up the property records." I heard him typing on a keyboard. "Give me the address of the entrance." I gave it to him and waited, watching the snow continue to fall. My phone buzzed with texts from residents asking when their streets would be cleared. I did not know how to answer them. "Okay," Brian said after a few minutes. "I am looking at the plat map. The roads inside Maple Ridge are indeed private property, maintained by the HOA. Technically, she is right that she can control access, but only to a point. There are still easement laws, emergency access requirements, and the fact that you have a valid contract. So what do I do? Honestly, in the middle of a blizzard, you are not going to get a judge to issue an emergency order allowing you access. That would take hours, maybe days. And if she called the cops right now, even if you are in the right, it would be a whole mess. Your best bet is to document everything. Take photos, save all communications, and let her dig her own grave. So I just leave those people trapped. Warren, I know it sucks, but you cannot force your way onto private property, even if you have a contract. That contract probably has some clause about HOA authority anyway. What you can do is make it very clear to the residents that you tried to fulfill your obligations and were physically prevented from doing so by the HOA president. Let them put pressure on her. I wanted to punch something. This is ridiculous. I agree, but play the long game here. Document, 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 and send me everything. If she terminates your contract over this, we will have a great case for breach. I thanked him and hung up, then sat in my truck watching the entrance to Maple Ridge slowly disappear under fresh snow. My phone was blowing up now. More texts, some calls. I started responding to everyone with the same message. I was ready and willing to plow, but Patricia Hendricks had physically blocked me from entering and threatened to have me arrested for trespassing if I continued. I suggested they contact the HOA board. Then I drove away and finished my other contracts. I plowed the Riverside development, where people actually appreciated my work. I cleared the streets around Hillcrest Elementary. I helped an elderly man dig out his driveway on Oak Street. The whole time, my phone kept buzzing with messages from angry Maple Ridge residents. By noon, the storm was starting to ease up. 11 inches had fallen, with drifts up to 2 feet in some places. I grabbed lunch at a diner and checked my email. There were 43 new messages. About half were from Maple Ridge residents, ranging from confused to furious. The other half were from Patricia. The first email, timestamped at 7 in the morning, formally notified me that my services were no longer required at Maple Ridge due to my flagrant disregard for HOA authority and failure to follow proper procedures. The rest were increasingly unhinged rants about my unprofessionalism, my incompetence, and my attempt to poison residents against their duly elected leadership. I forwarded everything to Brian, then decided to treat myself to a piece of pie. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I did not recognize with a Burlington area code. Warren Fischer. Mr. Fischer, my name is David Moreland. I live in Maple Ridge on Birch Lane. I am also on the HOA board, though apparently Patricia did not feel the need to inform the rest of us about her little tantrum this morning. I sat up straighter. Go on. I just got off the phone with 6 other board members. We are all snowed in. None of us can get out of our driveways, and we are just now finding out that Patricia blocked you from plowing and then fired you without board approval. Which, by the way, she does not have the authority to do. Hiring and firing contractors requires a majority board vote. I tried to explain that to her. I am sure you did. Patricia has a habit of believing the rules only apply to other people. Look, I am calling to apologize on behalf of the board and to ask if you would be willing to come back and finish the job. We will pay you extra for the trouble, and I am going to be calling an emergency meeting tonight to discuss removing Patricia from her position. I considered it. On one hand, I needed the money, and I genuinely felt bad for the residents who were trapped. On the other hand, I really wanted to make Patricia sweat a little longer. I appreciate the call, David, but here is my concern. If I come back now and Patricia tries to block me again, we are right back where we started. And honestly, after being threatened and fired, I am not super eager to deal with that kind of hostility. I understand. What if I met you at the entrance and escorted you in? Patricia does not have the authority to override a board member, even if she thinks she does. You can get to the entrance. I have a Jeep with snow tires and a lot of determination. Give me an hour. We agreed to meet at 2 o'clock. I finished my pie, drank 3 cups of coffee, and tried to shake off the adrenaline from the morning. When I pulled up to the Maple Ridge entrance at 2, David was already there, standing next to a black Jeep Wrangler. He was a tall guy, maybe 60, with gray hair and a practical winter coat that had actually seen use. We shook hands. I really appreciate you coming back, he said. This is a mess, and it is not your fault. Just do me a favor and keep Patricia away from me. I do not trust myself to be polite right now. I will do my best, but I should warn you she is on the warpath. She has been sending emails all morning about how you abandoned the development in a snow emergency and how she had to personally ensure safety by controlling traffic flow. I laughed bitterly. Controlling traffic flow, that is what she is calling it. Patricia lives in her own reality. Come on, let us get these streets cleared before someone has a medical emergency. I followed David's Jeep into the development. The streets I had plowed that morning were already buried again under a fresh layer of snow, but at least they were passable. The deeper streets, the ones Patricia had blocked me from reaching, were a disaster. Cars were buried up to their door handles. Driveways were invisible. I could see people peering out their windows, watching us arrive like we were a rescue convoy. I got to work, starting with the main routes and working my way through the grid. It was slow going. The snow was heavy and wet, and it had been sitting for hours, compacting under its own weight. My plow scraped and groaned as I pushed through. I was clearing Birch Lane when I saw the white Cadillac coming toward me. Patricia, of course. She pulled up alongside my truck and rolled down her window, her face flushed with anger. What do you think you are doing? I terminated your contract. You are trespassing. I rolled down my own window. Take it up with David Moreland. He is a board member and he authorized me to be here. David does not have that authority. I am the president, and he is a board member with equal say in contractor decisions. Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do. I started to roll up my window, but she was not done. If you do not leave immediately, I will call the police. Go ahead, I said. I would love to explain to them how you blocked a snow removal contractor during a blizzard and left 200 families trapped in their homes. I am sure that will go great for you." Her face turned an interesting shade of red. "You have no idea who you are dealing with. I will destroy you. I will make sure you never get another contract in this town. I will sue you for harassment and defamation and anything else my lawyer can think of." Looking forward to it. I rolled up the window and continued plowing. She followed me for a while, her Cadillac crawling along behind my truck, but eventually she gave up and drove away. I saw her later, parked in front of her house, sitting in the driver's seat and talking angrily on her phone. Probably calling her lawyer, or her husband, or the mayor. I did not care anymore. It took me 4 hours to clear all the streets. By the time I finished, it was getting dark and I was exhausted. David met me at the entrance again and handed me a check for double my usual rate. "The board voted," he said. "Unanimous decision. This is for today, plus a bonus for putting up with Patricia's nonsense. We also voted to remove her as president, effective immediately." Seriously. We have been dealing with her power trips for months, but this was the last straw. Blocking emergency snow removal, that is not just petty, it is dangerous. We are installing Tom Richardson as interim president until the next election. I took the check and shook his hand. "I appreciate you standing up for me. You did your job. That is all we ask. And Warren, if Patricia does try to sue you or cause more trouble, you let me know. I am a retired attorney, and I would be happy to help." I drove home that night feeling vindicated but also deeply tired. The kind of tired that comes from dealing with unreasonable people who think the world revolves around them. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and a dozen voicemails. The first one was from Marcus, my employee. "Warren, you need to check the news. Like right now." I fumbled for my laptop and pulled up the local news website. The headline made my blood run cold. "Local HOA president claims snow plow driver endangered residents, demands investigation." The article featured an interview with Patricia, who claimed that I had recklessly and negligently plowed the streets of Maple Ridge, creating dangerous conditions and damaging property. She alleged that I had knocked over mailboxes, blocked driveways with snow berms, and ignored her attempts to coordinate proper snow removal procedures. She was calling for the city to investigate my business license and for residents to file formal complaints. There were quotes from her that made me want to throw my laptop across the room. "Mr. Fischer has shown a complete disregard for the safety and well-being of our community. When I tried to ensure proper protocols were followed, he became hostile and threatening. I fear for what might have happened if I had not been there to protect our residents, protect the residents." The woman who had literally blocked me from plowing was claiming she was protecting people. My phone rang. "Brian, my lawyer. Tell me you saw the news," he said. "I saw it." "Okay. Do not respond to any media requests. Do not post anything on social media. Do not talk to anyone except me. She is trying to control the narrative, and if you react emotionally, she wins." "Brian, she is lying. She is flat out lying about everything." "I know, and we are going to prove that." I already have a dozen residents willing to give statements contradicting her story. David Moreland is drafting a formal letter from the HOA board repudiating her claims. We are going to bury her in facts, but you need to stay calm and let me handle this. I spent the rest of the day fielding calls from concerned clients, assuring them that the news story was bogus and that my business was solid. Most of them believed me. A few were nervous. I did not blame them. Bad press was bad press, even when it was false. That afternoon, David called me. "I just got served with a lawsuit. Patricia is suing the HOA board for wrongful termination and defamation. She is also suing you personally for tortious interference and emotional distress. She is suing me. For what? For allegedly turning the residents against her and causing her to lose her position. It is complete garbage, but it means you are going to need a lawyer. I already have one. This is going to cost me a fortune, is it not? Probably. But Warren, I meant what I said. I will help however I can. And I suspect this lawsuit is going to fall apart pretty quickly once we get to discovery. Patricia is not as smart as she thinks she is. The lawsuit was filed 3 days later. I read through it with Brian, and it was even more ridiculous than I expected. Patricia claimed I had engaged in a conspiracy with certain HOA board members to remove her from power. She claimed I had intentionally sabotaged snow removal efforts to make her look bad. She claimed I had caused her severe emotional distress, anxiety, and reputational harm. She was seeking $250,000 in damages. This is insane, I said. She blocked me from plowing and now she is suing me for not plowing. Yep, Brian said. Welcome to the legal system. The good news is that this is such an obviously frivolous suit that we can probably get it dismissed pretty quickly. The bad news is that it is still going to take time and money. While we were preparing our response to the lawsuit, the residents of Maple Ridge started fighting back. Someone created a Facebook group called Maple Ridge Against Patricia Hendricks, and it filled up with stories of her abuses of power. She had fined people for leaving their trash cans out an hour past collection time. She had threatened to foreclose on homes over minor landscaping violations. She had sent angry letters to a family whose 8-year-old daughter had drawn a hopscotch grid on the sidewalk with chalk, claiming it was defacement of common property. The group grew to over 300 members in less than a week. Local news picked up on it. Suddenly, the story was not HOA President vs. Reckless Plow Driver. It was HOA President's reign of terror exposed by snow removal dispute. Patricia did not take it well. She started showing up at HOA board meetings, which were now run by Tom Richardson, the interim president. She would sit in the back row and glare at everyone, occasionally shouting objections or accusations. At one meeting, she claimed that David Moreland had embezzled HOA funds to pay me off. She had zero evidence, but she said it anyway. David, to his credit, calmly explained that all financial records were available for review and that every penny was accounted for. At another meeting, Patricia tried to have me banned from the development entirely, claiming I was a security threat. Tom patiently explained that she no longer had any authority in the HOA and that her presence at meetings was becoming disruptive. She stormed out, shouting about lawyers and lawsuits and corrupt boards. It would have been funny if it were not so pathetic. Meanwhile, the lawsuit was going nowhere. Brian filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that Patricia had no legal basis for any of her claims. The judge scheduled a hearing for late February. In the meantime, we were in discovery, which meant both sides had to exchange documents and evidence. This was where Patricia made her biggest mistake. As part of discovery, we requested all of her communications related to the snow removal dispute. Emails, texts, phone records, everything. She was required by law to hand it over. And she did, but apparently she did not read through it carefully first. Buried in her email records was a thread between her and another HOA president from a neighboring development, a woman named Brenda. In the emails, Patricia laid out her entire plan. She had intentionally wanted to fire me and replace me with a company owned by Brenda's nephew, who had promised to give both Patricia and Brenda a kickback for every contract he got. The snow removal dispute was not about protocols or safety. It was about money. She had literally sabotaged snow removal during a blizzard so she could justify firing me and hiring someone who would pay her under the table. Brian called me the day he found the emails. "Warren, we hit the jackpot. She is done. This is fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and possibly criminal. I am forwarding this to the HOA board immediately, and I am recommending they file a police report." "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. She used her position as HOA president to enrich herself at the expense of the residents. That is illegal. Like, actually go to jail illegal." The HOA board held an emergency meeting that night. I was not there, but David called me afterward and filled me in. They had voted unanimously to file a police report and to pursue criminal charges against Patricia. They were also counter-suing her for the costs of the lawsuit and for any damages caused by her actions. 2 weeks later, Patricia Hendricks was arrested at her home on charges of fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. The local news covered it extensively, and the story went semi-viral on social media. The image of her being led out of her house in handcuffs, still wearing one of those velour tracksuits, became a minor meme in local circles. Her lawsuit against me was dismissed with prejudice, meaning she could not refile it. The judge also ordered her to pay my legal fees, which totaled just over $15,000. I did not expect to actually see that money, but it was nice to have the judgment. The criminal case took longer. Patricia hired an expensive lawyer who tried to argue that the emails were taken out of context, that she had never actually received any kickbacks, and that her actions were simply an attempt to find better snow removal services for the community. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Angela Torres, tore those arguments apart. She brought in Brenda, the other HOA president, who cut a deal and testified against Patricia. She brought in financial records showing suspicious payments into Patricia's bank account. She brought in residents who testified about Patricia's pattern of abusive behavior and retaliation. The trial lasted 3 days. I attended the final day, sitting in the back of the courtroom. Patricia looked smaller somehow, hunched in her chair, her lawyer whispering urgently in her ear. When the jury came back with a guilty verdict on all counts, she did not react at all. She just stared straight ahead, her face blank. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in prison, with the possibility of parole after 6 months. She also had to pay restitution to the HOA for the legal costs and damages, which totaled over $80,000. Her husband filed for divorce 2 weeks later. As for me, my business came out of it stronger than ever. The publicity, once the truth came out, actually worked in my favor. I got calls from half a dozen other HOA developments asking for quotes. People liked the idea of hiring a contractor who stood up to corruption and did not back down. I hired a 3rd employee and bought a 4th truck. Maple Ridge gave me a plaque at their annual meeting, thanking me for my professionalism and integrity. It was a nice gesture, though honestly, I would have preferred they just paid their bills on time and stayed out of my way. Tom Richardson remained as HOA president and turned out to be a reasonable, level-headed guy who understood that the HOA's job was to maintain common areas and enforce basic rules, not to micromanage everyone's lives. I still plow Maple Ridge every winter. The streets are the same, the houses are the same, but the atmosphere is different. People wave when I drive by. They bring me coffee sometimes when I am working early in the morning. It is a good contract, and I am glad I did not lose it. Every now and then, when I am plowing Birch Lane or Cedar Court, I think about that morning when Patricia blocked my truck in the middle of a blizzard. I think about the look on her face, that smug satisfaction, like she had won some great victory. And I think about how quickly it all fell apart for her, because she could not see past her own need for control. There is a lesson in there somewhere about power and hubris, and the dangers of being a petty tyrant. But mostly, I just think about how glad I am that I documented everything, kept my cool, and let her dig her own grave. I saw Patricia once after the trial, about a year later. I was getting groceries at the Shaw's on Shelburne Road, and I spotted her in the produce section. She was out on parole, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked tired and older, the brassy highlights grown out, the designer handbag replaced with a canvas tote. She saw me at the same time I saw her. For a moment, we just stared at each other across a display of apples. I waited for her to say something, to yell or accuse or justify. But she just looked away and hurried toward the exit, abandoning her shopping cart in the middle of the aisle. I finished my shopping and went home. It was early November, and the weather forecast was calling for the first snow of the season. I spent the evening checking my equipment, sharpening the plow blades, making sure the salt spreader was working properly. Marcus and Tony were coming by in the morning to help prep the trucks. My phone buzzed with an email from Tom Richardson. The subject line read, "Snow Removal Contract Renewal." I opened it and skimmed the message. The board had voted unanimously to renew my contract for another year, with a 5% rate increase to account for inflation and fuel costs. There was a note at the bottom. "Thanks for everything you do, Warren. We appreciate you." I smiled and sent back a quick reply confirming I accepted the terms. Then I poured myself a beer and sat on my back porch, watching the sun set over the hills. The air had that crisp smell that comes before the first snow, clean and sharp and full of promise. Winter was coming and I was ready. No HOA Karens, no blocked streets, no power trips. Just me, my trucks, and a whole lot of snow to move. Exactly the way it should be. The first snow came 2 days later, right on schedule. Just 3 inches, nothing major, but enough to test the equipment and shake off the rust from the off-season. I started my routes at 5 in the morning, the truck's headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. The streets of Burlington were quiet, just the sound of the plow and the occasional early commuter. I saved Maple Ridge for last, wanting to give the snow time to finish falling before I cleared their streets. When I pulled up to the entrance at 7:30, the sun was just starting to rise, painting the snow-covered development in shades of pink and gold. It looked peaceful, almost idyllic, like a postcard from a Vermont winter. I spent 2 hours working my way through the streets, the familiar rhythm of the job settling over me like an old coat. Turn, scrape, back up, push forward. Check the mirrors, watch for mailboxes, avoid the decorative lampposts. By the time I finished, the residents were starting to emerge, heading to work or school or wherever their days took them. Several people waved. One guy gave me a thumbs up. As I was leaving, I passed the house that used to be Patricia's. A new family had moved in over the summer, a young couple with 2 small kids. They had put up a swing set in the backyard and painted the front door a cheerful red. The husband was outside shoveling the driveway, and he stopped to wave as I drove by. I waved back and continued toward the exit, feeling a sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with money or vindication or winning some dispute. It was the simpler satisfaction of a job done well, of a community that functioned the way it was supposed to, of a morning spent doing work that mattered. The snow kept falling throughout the winter, as it always did in Vermont. Big storms and small ones, nor'easters and squalls, the occasional ice storm that made everything treacherous. I plowed through all of it, me and my crew, keeping the streets clear and the driveways passable. We worked long hours and drank too much coffee and dealt with the occasional difficult client, because that is just part of the job. But there were no more Patricias. No more blocked streets or power trips or threats. Just honest work for honest pay, and at the end of the day, that was all I had ever wanted. One evening in late March, when the winter was finally winding down and the snow was starting to melt, I got a call from David Moreland. He was putting together a community appreciation event for local service providers, and he wanted to feature my company. I tried to decline, saying I was just doing my job, but he insisted. "Warren, you did more than your job," he said. "You stood up to someone who was abusing her authority, and you did it the right way. That matters. Let us say thank you." So I went to the event, held in the Maple Ridge Community Center on a Saturday afternoon. There were maybe 50 people there, residents and board members and local business owners. Tom Richardson gave a speech about community values and the importance of integrity. Then he called me up and presented me with a framed certificate of appreciation. I said a few words, thanking everyone for their support and their business. I talked about how much I loved Vermont winters and the satisfaction of helping people get where they needed to go safely. I kept it short because I was never much for public speaking. Afterward, people came up to shake my hand and chat. One older woman, Mrs. Patterson from Cedar Court, told me that her daughter had been 9 months pregnant during that blizzard, and she had been terrified about what would happen if she went into labor with the streets unplowed. "You did the right thing," she said, squeezing my hand. "Do not ever doubt that." I thought about Patricia again, about how she had been so focused on asserting her authority that she had lost sight of what actually mattered. The rules were supposed to serve the community, not the other way around. And when someone started using rules as weapons, as tools for control rather than tools for help, that was when things went wrong. Driving home that evening, I passed the Shaws where I had seen Patricia. I wondered where she was now, what she was doing, whether she had learned anything from the experience. Probably not. People like that rarely did. They just moved on to the next situation, the next opportunity to be in charge, the next group of people to control. But that was not my problem anymore. My problem was getting home, having dinner with my girlfriend Sarah, and getting a good night's sleep before the next job. Spring was coming, which meant the plowing season was almost over. Soon, I would switch to landscaping and maintenance work, filling potholes and repairing driveways damaged by the winter freeze-thaw cycle. Different work, but the same principle. Show up, do the job right, treat people with respect, and do not let anyone push you around. It had served me well for 15 years, and I figured it would serve me well for 15 more. The Maple Ridge story became something of a legend in the local snow removal community. Other plow drivers would bring it up at the diner or the equipment supply shop, always with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. "I heard about this HOA president who blocked a plow during a blizzard," they would say. And I would nod and confirm that yes, it really happened. And yes, it was as crazy as it sounded. Some of them had their own stories about difficult clients or insane HOA regulations. We would trade war stories over coffee and donuts, laughing at the absurdity of it all. But there was always an undercurrent of frustration too, because for every Patricia who ended up in jail, there were a dozen more out there making people's lives difficult in smaller, less criminal ways. The key, I had learned, was documentation and professionalism. Keep records of everything. Stay calm. Follow the rules even when the other person was not. And when someone crossed the line from difficult to illegal, do not be afraid to stand up and fight back. It was a lesson I tried to pass on to Marcus and Tony, my employees. They were both young guys, mid-20s, still learning the business. I told them about Patricia, about the importance of keeping records and staying professional no matter how crazy a client got. What if someone blocks you? Tony asked. What do? You call me, I said. And then you call a lawyer if you need to, but you do not engage. You do not yell, you do not push, you do not make threats. You document what happened and you walk away. Because the moment you lose your cool, you lose your credibility. They nodded, taking it in. I hoped they would never need that advice, but I knew they probably would. This business attracted difficult personalities sometimes, people who saw snow removal as just another opportunity to exert control or vent their frustrations. But it also attracted good people. People like David and Tom, who understood that community was about cooperation, not domination. People like Mrs. Patterson, who appreciated the work we did and took the time to say thank you. Those were the people who made the job worthwhile, who reminded me why I got into this business in the first place. As winter melted into spring and spring turned to summer, life moved on. The story faded from the news. Patricia served her time and disappeared from public life. The Maple Ridge HOA settled into a new normal, with reasonable leadership and sensible policies. I kept plowing, kept building my business, kept showing up and doing the work. And every time I drove past that spot on Maple Way where Patricia had blocked my truck, I allowed myself a small smile. Because in the end, despite everything she had tried to do, I had won. Not by fighting dirty or stooping to her level, but by doing exactly what I was supposed to do, my job. That was the thing about people like Patricia. They counted on everyone else being too intimidated or too tired or too afraid to push back. They relied on the fact that most people would just go along to get along, even when it meant accepting unreasonable demands or unfair treatment. But when someone finally stood up and said no, when someone had the documentation and the persistence and the resources to fight back properly, the whole house of cards came tumbling down. Because bullies, whether they wear a badge or a business suit or a velour tracksuit with blonde highlights, are fundamentally weak. Their power comes from intimidation, not substance, and once you strip away that intimidation, there is nothing left. I thought about this on a cold morning in December, almost exactly a year after the blizzard incident. Another big storm was rolling in, and I was preparing for another long day of plowing. The forecast called for 10 to 12 inches, with wind and ice mixed in. Classic Vermont winter chaos. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom Richardson. Storm coming. We are ready when you are. Thanks for everything you do. Simple, straightforward, respectful. Everything that Patricia had not been. I texted back a confirmation and headed out to prep the trucks. Marcus and Tony were already at the garage, checking fluid levels and testing equipment. We worked efficiently, the routine so familiar now that we barely needed to talk. By the time the snow started falling, we were ready. We hit the streets at dawn, carving paths through the white, keeping Burlington moving. It was hard work, cold work, exhausting work. But it was honest work, and at the end of the day, I could drive home knowing that I had made a difference. That night, after 18 hours on the road, I collapsed into bed and slept the deep, dreamless sleep of someone who had earned their rest. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was shining, the sky was clear, and the streets I had plowed were already filling with traffic and life. Somewhere out there, Patricia Hendricks was probably still angry, still convinced that she had been wronged, still blaming everyone else for the consequences of her own actions. But that was her burden to carry, not mine. I had streets to plow, clients to serve, and a business to run. And I had learned, through one woman's attempt to destroy me, that integrity and documentation were worth more than any HOA contract. The snow would keep falling, winters would keep coming, and I would keep doing what I did best, showing up, working hard, and refusing to be bullied. That was enough. That was everything. Years from now, when I am old and retired and someone asks me about the craziest thing that ever happened in my snow plowing career, I will tell them about the HOA Karen who blocked my route during a blizzard. I will tell them about the lawsuit and the trial and the emails that brought her down. I will tell them about the moment she was led away in handcuffs and the moment I received my certificate of appreciation from a grateful community. But mostly, I will tell them about the lesson I learned, that doing the right thing, even when it is hard, even when it costs you, even when someone with authority is screaming at you to stop, is always worth it in the end, because communities are built on trust and service and mutual respect. And when someone tries to tear that down for their own benefit, it is up to the rest of us to stand up and say no. I stood up. I said no, and I won. Not because I was special or brave or particularly clever, but because I documented everything, stayed professional, and refused to back down from what I knew was right. That is the story. That is what happened when HOA Karen blocked my snow route, and I left her buried while I plowed everyone else. And if I had to do it all over again, I would not change a single thing.